I've had a number of people tell me that I worry too much and concern myself too much with conference rankings and conference ratings, that it doesn't matter how strong the conferences are, it's how strong the teams are, because the College Football Playoff Committee is going to be comparing teams, not conferences. Let's understand something. The typical college football team playing a 12-game schedule plays 8 in its conference, maybe 9 in the Big 12 or in the Pac-12. Then they only play one really tough, difficult opponent, typically outside the conference, and then they play 3 softies. So that is the only one game that you can compare these conferences, i.e. compare the teams in the conferences. Otherwise, it's apples and oranges, because once each conference plays within its conference schedule, they play within a silo. Therefore, this is the only territory we have to compare teams. Therefore, we've got to compare the conferences. If that makes sense, let's compare the conferences right now. All right. Despite faltering in the regular season with only 5 wins in 11 games against the other Power 5 conferences, the SEC, in my opinion, was still the best conference in college football. And that also, despite faltering in postseason play, and even though the SEC was 7-5 in postseason play, just 6-5 against the Power 5, and the big wins were against Minnesota and Louisville. They lost the big games against Ohio State and against Notre Dame, against Wisconsin, and the like. Okay, but in week 1 of 2015, the SEC showed up, made a statement. The conference went 13-1, and who lost? It was Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt is by far, it's not even close, the worst team in the SEC, and Vandy lost to a power from the group of 5 in Western Kentucky, and they only lost by 2 points, 14-12. So not a bad loss for the SEC, as they suffered a few last season in postseason play. The SEC went 13-1. Unfortunately, out of those 13 wins, only 4 of them against the other Power 5. So you had Texas A&M beat Arizona State, Auburn over Louisville, South Carolina beat North Carolina, and you had, of course, the Alabama-Wisconsin game. So none of those 4 games was an inferior team from the SEC playing a highly seeded and respected team from another conference. So there were no upsets here. Really, the statement game, I believed, was the Arizona State game, because you had Texas A&M, a team that went 8-5 last season, taking on an Arizona State team from arguably the best conference in college football. We're still having that debate, still working that out. Week 1 would definitely go to the SEC. But Arizona State, a team that was projected by some to get to the Pac-12 championship game and possibly the playoffs, and Texas A&M dominated that game. They played much better than Arizona State on a neutral field, somewhat slighted toward Texas A&M, it being in Houston, but still, Texas A&M completely outplayed the Sun Devils, winning by 3 touchdowns. Big win for the SEC. All right, Alabama, Wisconsin. Bama expected to be the best team in the SEC. Wisconsin maybe a 3 or 4 seed out of the Big Ten. So that's a game the SEC should win. Alabama won in convincing fashion in the second half, 35-17. Auburn-Louisville, Tigers certainly the better team, although they almost let it slip away. So Auburn proved to be the better team, won the game, statistically superior, but almost blew it. And that's an Auburn team that's arguably the best team in the SEC. We'll find out. Louisville considered about the 4th best team. That was their seeding last year in the ACC. And then South Carolina, North Carolina. If anything, this may have been, from a certain perspective, the best win for the SEC, in that South Carolina is about the 10th or 11th seed expected in the SEC, and North Carolina more like a 7 or 8 in the ACC. And of course, South Carolina pulled out that game 17-13. They were the winner, although it was North Carolina that looked better in the first half. So the SEC wins 4 straight against the Power 5. They go 13-1. It was not a bad loss for Vandy against Western Kentucky. No real upset wins here, but I give the SEC an A grade for week one play against non-conference competition. There's only a few precious games left, and most of them at the end of the season when we have the Florida State, Georgia Tech, and Clemson, South Carolina weekend. So savor this, SEC fans. The conference came through in week one at 13-1. Let's talk it up right here on Mark Rogers TV.